Well, hey everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Point Podcast. And I have a couple of special guests with me today. I have Miss Angela Lamb and Pastor Mark Pangle.
Hello.
And I asked them to come along because they know what I want to talk about very well. In fact, Angela and Pastor Mark and I have got together and we have talked about this on numerous occasions. And what I want to do today is I just want to walk through the four major interpretations of Revelation once again, because now that we've gotten through Revelation 1, we'll finish the Church of Laodicea this Sunday. And then next week, we'll jump into the throne room of God in chapter 4, and then the scroll being opened in chapter 5. And from there, chapter 6 to 19 is where you get into all of the debate about when this was taking place and exactly what is taking place. And with all of that debate comes the four major interpretations of the book of Revelation. So what I want to do is just kind of walk through them one by one very quickly. Let's just have a little bit of fun. And what I want these two to do is just chime in, ask questions.
Sounds good.
I'll ask them questions. They'll give their opinion on something or ask a question that's not even their opinion, and just have a little bit of fun and help everyone understand those four major interpretations once again. Now, do you guys remember what the four interpretations are?
Yes, sir.
Fire away. What are they?
Futurist,
Preterist,
idealist,
Historist.
Historicist.
And I get that one wrong. I call it historist,
That's
not
right. We'll call it
historicist.
historicist. Okay. All right. So, Miss Angela, what does the idealist believe in?
So the idealist is going to take everything from Revelation 6 through 19 and paint it as a type of allegory, as a metaphor for things that are true of any age, for the battle of good versus evil or anything like that. They're very much not specific about timing or even what all these events are going to look like, but they do gain what they say are spiritual truths from it, even though it's not a concrete event taking place.
Very good. Very good. Do you remember the movie I used as an example?
Oh, I don't. Star Wars.
That was the idealist.
Yep.
Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Chronicles
there you
of
go.
Narnia.
Yep.
Yep. They just say it's a lot like that. It's not exactly this isn't the way it is, but it's just a good story.
And so you used Lewis because he wrote that way.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean Lewis himself was an idealist in this regard.
Very good. Very good. All right, Pastor Mark, historicist. Since you can't pronounce it, go ahead and tell us what it means.
The short version is
Yes, we want
we're
short.
looking backwards. Everything happened. It's historical in viewpoint. So almost everything that took place is in the rearview mirror.
Now, remember, some of it is still
Yes.
in the future.
Yes.
And the problem with historicists is what?
They have a moving target constantly.
Very well said. Okay, this event's going to happen here.
When it doesn't,
it didn't happen. Let's go to this
moving the
event.
target.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is the big earthquake they're talking about, and 100 years later,
you
there's
go.
another earthquake, and it's that was the
constant.
Very
earthquake.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Now, the two that I believe are the ones with the most weight with them would be the preterist and the futurist. So what I want to do is kind of draw that timeline like I had shown you before on the stage, and kind of walk through now the futurist view. And as we draw it out, we'll kind of bring in the preterist view also. But we started here with, and we'll call that the cross. All right. And what we call this right here, what's this that we're in right now, you guys?
It'd be the church
This
age.
would be called the church age, and this is what we're living in now. Now, ... Miss Angela, what's ...
An unknown amount of time.
Don't know.
Maybe.
Don't know.
Yep.
Okay. And it's here that we get into some debate. This is what I'll call the 7-year tribulation. All right. So we got 7 years. Where do we get the 7 years?
oh my goodness, hang on.
Go ahead.
It's the 1,260 days
Where do we find that? All
twice.
I don't know the exact reference off the top of my head.
right. Daniel. We go to the book of Daniel, and if you remember, he makes our way through it. And I've already had some people say, Pastor, when are you going to do the rest of Daniel? Well, when we get to here, and it pertains to that week, because I was scared you'd forget it, okay? So we have here 7 years, and this is the 7 years of tribulation. Up here would be the 7 years of the wedding feast. Okay, a futurist believes what?
This is all in the future.
Correct, but what does the futurist say happens right here?
We get raptured.
We get raptured. So right here we see, and they would use the futurist, 1 Thessalonians 4, where that Christ returns, He's in the clouds. We meet him, and we are taking up, and now we have the 7 years of wedding feast. What's happened to the people down here on earth?
Chaos.
Turmoil. Awful.
This is here what I would call chapter 6 through chapter 19, and all of this is nothing but the 7 seals, the 7 bowls, the 7 judgments, and all that chaos breaking loose. Okay? Now, the futurists would say that we are raptured, the church.
Yes.
7 years of wedding feast with Christ. Those left, complete total chaos. What does a preterist say about what we just discussed about in the futures?
I'll take this. Well, a partial preterist is going to look at some of the events in Revelation between chapter 6 to 18, some of the things out of Matthew 24, and they're going to tie those to things that happened in Jerusalem early on in this millennium. Stuff with, Emperor Titus coming in and destroying the temple. So they're going to take some of that chaos and those judgments and say that some of those have already taken place and they're not literally going to happen again in the future.
And a partial preterist will take the history books that back up, for example, Josephus. They'll see some of the examples and say that must have meant in 73 when the Zealots are gone up on Masada, and
Very
in
good.
70.
Very well said.
We can see the history backing up some of these events. And so a preterist would say that must mean a partial preterist.
And what's the key date?
70 AD.
70 AD. And what happened in 70 AD?
Destruction of the temple.
Destruction of the temple. Okay,
Titus.
so the preterists would say that those 7 bowls, those 7 judgments,
Yeah.
those plagues, all of that was taking place during the first century,
Yes.
building up to 70 AD.
And there's really good evidence for a lot of other events too. So you look at the abomination of desolation out of Daniel, and you could really tie that to emperors like Antiochus Epiphanes and stuff that
doubt.
happened, and really say this is clearly a prophecy of something that has already taken place in the past for us.
And we'll really get into this more as we get into chapter 6 through 19. But when it comes to the preterist view, I don't think a lot of people understand that when you look at the plagues, a lot of those are the same plagues that took place already. When you look at the 7 seals, okay, you can go back in Roman history and look at some of this stuff. But then if you look at the futurist view, it really makes you go, so
Yeah.
There's great evidence.
I'm going to say something I've said before, and we'll really say it every week on these chapters. I will not allow your eschatology
Yes.
to make me truly understand your theology, okay? So we could all have a different opinion here of eschatology being the study of end times, and I'd be like, you know what? I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Now, you tell me your theology is the Bible's not true.
There you go.
Okay, the virgin birth. Oh, my God. Okay.
And that's the one place that we would all agree you can't have an eschatology view that everything's already happened in Revelation. Jesus has not brought his bride out.
good.
We have not. So that's the one thing we all agree on is the very end of the book has not happened.
Chapters 20, 21, 22.
Correct.
Everybody would say, okay, that's
With the exception of the full preterist.
good.
Yeah,
I'm glad
I
you
think
said
it
that.
would be a good thing to note why we keep saying partial preterist is
No,
a full.
I keep saying preterist, and I need to say
Yeah.
partial preterist. I do.
It's actually not full preterist, it's
hyper preterist.
And
And
what
so
is a
we-
hyper preterist, Angela?
So a hyper preterist is going to believe that all of this has already taken place, up including the return of Christ.
And let me go back to my timeline here. A hyper preterist is going to say that this line continues, and continues. When does Christ return in a hyper preterist?
He's already returned.
He's already returned.
And it's fascinating how people who are very smart can do gymnastics with the scriptures to support
That's
their own
a
beliefs.
great word.
So you can take something like, well, Christ hasn't returned. Look around. It doesn't look like Christ has returned. But does he not come to you at the moment of your salvation? Did the Holy Spirit not return at Pentecost? And so they will find ways to support their viewpoint. But personally, I do believe they are outside the realms of
Completely agree.
heterodoxy at that point. Yep.
When we get to Revelation 20, it talks about the 1,000-year millennial reign,
go.
and we'll really talk about that also
Oh, yeah.
as we make our way into the future. All right. So again, remember on our timeline, we have the wedding feast, we have the 7 years of tribulation. All right. At the end of the 7 years, Christ will return, and his feet will actually hit the ground, and we'll be right here. And here's where you see where the says 1,000-year millennial reign. Now, Angela, we'll go to you first. Explain to me what the 1,000-year millennial reign is.
Okay, so if we're coming at this from a futurist premillennial perspective, that is
Hold on one thought. Premillennial.
Yes.
Okay. Remember, we had pre, mid, post tribulation,
Yes.
which
Yes.
means we are
Yep.
raptured before the tribulation, mid, halfway in the tribulation,
Yes.
post, after the tribulation.
Yes.
All right. Now the same thing with the 1,000-year millennial reign.
Yep.
Pre, or don't believe post. And so what we're referring to now is the pre-millennial reign.
Yeah. Which seems to be the standard for the futurists. We're looking at a 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ in the future, where he will establish his kingdom on the earth. We will rule with him as the saints, and it will be a great time. People will still be coming to know the Lord. This will be post-tribulation, but it is essentially 1,000 years where, I believe what was intended in the beginning in the garden will finally
good.
be
I agree
fixed and made correct.
Very good. Very good.
So we'll be working, we'll be cultivating, we will be flourishing in the way that we would without sin.
I look at it this way. I'll never
Yeah.
lose in golf again.
You won't lose it all.
I'll never lose in
I
golf
love
again.
it. And the courses will be super nice.
Exactly right. All right, Pastor
Satan's
Mark.
bound.
I was about you
During
beat
those
me to it.
1,000
All right.
years.
So
Yep.
where is Satan during this, according to Revelation 20, starting at the very beginning there?
He's bound, but not in the lake of fire.
So let's
No.
put it right here. Satan is bound during this time. Can you imagine? Here we go. Can you imagine living with Christ
Man.
as the king, and there is no Satan whatsoever? That's the 1,000-year millennial reign. Now, for me personally, this is just me speaking out loud. Come, King Jesus,
Isn't that
come
the truth?
Oh yeah, it could start tomorrow.
today.
Yeah.
Please, King Jesus, come. Well, Pastor, aren't you worried about what? Literally, I hate
No.
to say it this way, the hell breaking loose on earth? Take me
No,
in
because-
with King Jesus and Satan being bound. Oh my
Exactly.
goodness. Sign me up today.
Well, and during those 1,000 years, those of us that if we don't get to experience it before he comes, our bodies were resurrected.
Oh, that's a
we
good
don't
point.
have to worry about dying.
No.
Like that's not an issue. We don't have to worry about all the other things. Humanly speaking, a lot changes. In other words, we're reigning, we're ruling. Literally, I love Angela's interpretation of it's
gonna be
like the
incredible.
Garden of Eden.
It's going to be
It
incredible.
really
It
will
will
be.
be.
And so, give me the 1,000 years
I'm
with
up.
Jesus
Let's go.
on
Let's
his
go.
throne.
All right. Now, what we did leave out was right here when Christ's feet touch. I believe this is what will happen, which is called we talked about this the other day in great detail.
Bema.
The Bema. So let me just write that right there. If you remember, Bema is all about receiving rewards. And so this is where I Pastor, why do you share the gospel so much? Well, number one, you talk about what you love. But truth be told, one of the main reasons I do it, not so much to help lead you to Christ, but I'm trying to build
don't wanna be
rewards.
empty-handed.
Why do you pick up so many hitchhikers?
Don't want to be empty-handed.
Matthew 25. What you do to the least of these, you do for me. Now, it didn't say you passed me by when you had a very nice vehicle and you could have picked me up and gave me a ride. But what it does say is what you didn't do for him, you didn't do for me. And,
Yeah.
and it's here that I believe, right here at the Bema seat, where we're going to be rewarded for all that we've done for Christ.
And I think that's a key point too. This is not rewarded for ourselves in a selfish manner so that we
Good.
can have better stuff. You're given crowns to then lay at the feet of Jesus. So all of your righteous deeds and all the hitchhikers you pick up aren't anything if you weren't doing them for him to start
Good
with.
reason. It's a good word.
And-
Good word.
Yeah.
I agree. That's excellent. And the other side of it is, and you do such a great job teaching us obedience matters. This is where I can sacrifice all I want, but obedience is greater than sacrifice. So my heart will want to serve others
That's exactly
if
right.
I'm passionately in love with Jesus. And so to me, what our gifts will look like is based on, was I obedient with what God put in front of me or not?
Parable of the talents.
That's
Matthew
it.
25. And what okay, he didn't give us all the same talents.
Nope.
Oh, I wish I could sing.
Me too. I say it every week.
It ain't there. It ain't there.
I mean, you can sing. Nobody wants
I mean,
to
we
listen.
can-
Nobody wants to listen.
And
Well
it's
said,
a
well
joyful
said.
noise. It just doesn't need a microphone.
All right. At the end, now look, quick question about this. Would the futurist and the preterist, partial preterist, agree on the 1,000-year millennium? People are going to argue
Well,
about everything, but
some.
for the
Yeah.
majority, for the most part,
They can. We did not discuss amillennialism here.
that's a good word.
So you are going to find a lot of preterists that are amillennial, which means they don't believe in a literal 1,000 years
Correct.
in the future. They believe in more of a figurative reign of Christ, and they would say we are living in it currently.
Okay. Can you give me a verse on why they would say it's not a literal 1,000 year? For a day.
A day
You
is
got
like
it.
1,000 years.
It's like 1,000 years.
Yeah.
You got it. And I'm going to be honest with you.
And that's out of context, in my opinion. But
I have struggled with the 1,000-year millennial reign myself through time, but through the course of this, I've never studied something so much as I have in my life for preparing for Revelation. I'm convinced there is a
There's
1,000-year
1,000
millennial
years.
reign. Yes,
there's a lot of things we don't know. It's hard.
There's a reason I believe in Revelation 20 it says 1,000 year, 1,000 year, 1,000 year, 5,000 year, 1,000 year. He's making a point.
I don't think it's
And I think-
metaphorical.
I don't either.
I think we could give some comfort to people that are listening and are, a lot of people want to be, tell me what to believe, tell me what
Yes.
is true. All millennials, there are very famous, very smart
Yes.
people in that camp.
Very
You
yes.
look at most of the reformers, you look at St. Augustine, they were all millennial
Yes.
in their beliefs. If you land on that with your reading of scripture, I'm not going to think any
Correct.
worse the way for you. This happens to be where we all agree, but I would not say that this is a necessary
agree.
belief at all.
All right. At the end of the 1,000 years, what happens right here?
Great white throne.
Okay, even right before the great white throne,
Satan.
who's been bound for 1,000
Satan's
years?
been
Satan's
bound.
released.
So I'm gonna go back to my timeline. Right here, the King James calls this
final
a
Little
little
season.
season. Very good, Angela. This is a little
Where he's led on.
season. Okay, and his desire is to literally kill, destroy, annihilate
Yes.
everything. But then, and I call it the GWT, the Great White Throne, and this is where every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. And here's something that we haven't got to yet, but we will in the very near future. People talk about how incredible heaven's going to be, but it says very clearly, but he will wipe away your tears. Okay, why are there tears?
Because those of us that are saved are witnesses at the great white throne, not being judged. We're already saved. We're one of his. Therefore, we're standing in the back watching all the people who are lost, whose knees are hitting the ground but never did before.
It's good.
And they're thrown
Very well said.
And I think
into separation.
I think to your point, I've heard you preach this several times, is that people will look at you and say, why didn't
Why?
you tell me? Why did you
That's
keep
it.
this to
So
yourself?
Angela, you knew,
Yep.
and you never told me, and you knew where I was going to go.
Oh, yeah.
I'm convinced that
And
when you
we'll cry.
get to the the GWT again, you're going to be asked two questions. Number one, what'd you do with
My son.
My son.
What'd you do with Jesus? Okay, and what it means by what'd you do with Jesus? Did you accept him? Now listen. It doesn't mean raise your hand in a dark room and say, "Oh, hey, I want to go to heaven." And this is the question. I'm going to keep pushing. Let's remove heaven out of the equation. There is no heaven. Now, obviously, I'm making this up, but there is no heaven. Do you still want a radical love relationship with Jesus? Debbie has nothing to do, my wife, of going to heaven, but I still want a radical love relationship with her. Do you want a radical love relationship with Jesus, taking heaven out of the equation? What did you do with my son? All right, for those of us, this is where he separates the sheep from the goats, Matthew 25. For those of us that are sheep who have fallen in love with him, we'll be asked another question. But what's going to happen to those who did not fall in love with Christ?
They're separated for all eternity.
Cast into the lake of fire.
Satan.
To the lake
And
of
this
fire
is
with
called
Satan.
the second death. They've died physically, and now they will die spiritually. But then the other question that we will be asked is,
What did you do with the life I gave you?
what'd you do with the talents? What'd you do with the life that I gave you? And so many people are going to one day stand before Jesus
Man.
and say, well, I know I got saved,
Right.
but my question, even as we kind of wind down, isn't did you get saved, but did you ever fall radically in love
Yes.
with Jesus?
Isn't this where we return our gifts at the Bema seat? We're presented them, and then what did you do with Jesus? Maybe the time that we get to give them back. I don't know that,
I don't know that.
Oh, I'm glad you two said that because I was about to say, oh my gosh, you got a
but it would.
I don't know.
Here's what I'll say.
I don't know.
It kind of makes sense with what you do at the end. It kind of makes sense to go. Well, that's where I get to give them back.
There's a part of me that says, okay, here at
But
the
it could
Bema
be right
seat,
again.
hey, I received my gold medal. Now, what's the point of the gold medal? To give to you.
present.
Okay, my evaluation. And we'll leave that one alone for right now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm
But
with you.
this is what I do know, that at the great white throne, that it's at this point here that we will now see the new Jerusalem, the new heaven come down. And I am convinced that when I stand in the city of Jerusalem, I am standing where I will spend eternity. Now, it will look completely different.
Correct.
Yes.
But we will be right back on Mount Moriah,
Uriah.
where that Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac, and they put the Holy of Holies, and they built where the presence of God would be, because that is his city, his place, and that is where we will spend eternity in the new heaven, the new Jerusalem.
I think that's important. I think that's something that maybe is misunderstood. You know, earlier you said take heaven out of the equation. And I think so many people think we're going to go to heaven and we're going to worship and praise and all of that stuff. For a while, yes. But the great hope of all of this isn't that you get to go to heaven. It's that you get to go to an earth made right as it was intended to be. And I think it's going to be a beautiful way to spend eternity.
Well, if you go back to our timeline, and I could take the timeline from the cross right here, way back to the garden, I don't think people understand that from Genesis, what the Bible is telling us, from Genesis to Revelation, is God's plan of getting us right back into that garden again.
Yeah, I heard something interesting sometime, and this is nothing I would fight anybody over back up biblically, but Adam was given a command to be fruitful, multiply the earth, cultivate it, bend it to your will, and have dominion over it. He failed, so he got a few years in and didn't really finish out the task, but how long do you think it would have taken that to be completed? Probably about 1,000 years. So I think we are going to get to see something really cool, beautiful in the future, living on the garden. And it's also interesting being in Jerusalem. Y'all have been there. It's not that big. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people there.
That's why it says that only a few will enter. Well, I hope that helped, because we're about to begin to make our way in chapters 6 through 19 and talk about what the historicists believe, what the futurists believe, what the preterists believe. Well, Pastor, what do you believe? I believe that you need to get in the Word of God.
Come on.
And figure out what it says. And that's the point. See you next time.